This is the Business of Apps podcast, bringing you actionable insights from the leaders of the global app industry and the world's fastest growing apps. You can find more app news, data and analysis over at businessofapps.com.
Welcome to the Business of Apps podcast. On this show, we invite app industry professionals to cover various topics. And as always, we promise to do our best to keep it both insightful but brief. In this episode, we have Charlie Cooke, Head of Growth at Sidekick but Sorted Food. Charlie, welcome to the Business of Apps podcast.
Well, great to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
Great. It's great to have you on. All right. Let's make a quick mental experiment. When I say brand, what pops up in your mind? Apple, Nike, Tesla? That's right. All those are brands. In fact, if you think about it, you can easily count like a dozen of brands around you. And there's more. You can think of some of the mobile apps on your phone as brands as well. Today, Charlie will help you to get a better grasp on how to apply a brand concept to your app. But first, before talking about brand and what role does it play for apps, let's talk about you, Charlie. Please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, I've been in this space of digital marketing around sort of tech, startup, scale-up world for the last 10 years or so, across a variety of sectors from sport, property, language learning, health, and now food. So I've jumped around lots of different sectors, all sort of in that sort of digital marketing growth area. Love what I do, but I guess my real passion is in sport. Although I quickly realized it's a pretty tough industry to make any money. So it's just one of my hobbies now.
Right. So yeah, all over the place. And any good recollections from your previous experience, something, memorable from your, back in the days when you're working in sports area?
Well, yeah, the sport company I was working for took me to the US for 3 years. So, I mean, that was pretty memorable. A really interesting experience, sort of totally different market and set of customers. And that sort of bridged sort of quite guerrilla sort of marketing tactics, quite business development led. So actually it was a super interesting experience. So yeah,
Gotcha.
Wouldn't give that one up.
Nobody just speaks real English.
Yeah, all play real sports. But,
all right, yeah.
From a British standpoint, anyway.
Oh yeah. Okay, jokes aside, what is Sidekick by Sorted Food? Tell us about your company, please.
Yeah, so Sidekick is the mobile app product for sorted food. So those from the YouTube generation will maybe be familiar with Sorted Food, the YouTube channel. It's been going for about 13 years, I think now. It's just sort of a cooking entertainment show. 4 guys set it up, friends from school actually, just sort of came up with this sort of idea. But the Sidekick portion has sort of developed over the last couple of years, really looking to solve the issue, which is like cooking in the evening is a pain in the ass, paraphrasing. And yeah, there are a lot of solutions out there. You obviously got your kind of meal box companies, but we sort of feel that we can kind of help home cooks be better through improved education and habits around planning, shopping, and cooking. So we're sort of going to the root cause of a lot of these things, not what we would term the sort of paracetamol solution by just sort of giving people the end product, So yeah, that's sort of where we're at really with it. There's plenty of food around the office as well, which is a good perk.
The major question of today's conversation is brand. And I guess if we're not introducing as a concept, that would be a bad start. So let's begin with explaining what is brand.
Yeah, so for us and for me, it's really fundamental things. And a lot of my thinking around this started with, and maybe for lots of people, like the Simon Sinek starting with why book. It's around why the company exists, like how we communicate our ideas clearly, build relationship with customers. It's that sort of starting point for a company. How you tell that story and evoke an emotional response from someone. And it's all that will then manifest itself from obviously once you have that central idea in the product offering, maybe how it's visually and written the culture of the business, and lots of those other elements that come from it. But it really starts with that focal point of like why we exist. And from a customer standpoint, it's sort of then why should we care about your product? And evoking that emotional response is one of the strongest drivers of behavior in humans. So it's a really kind of central, important part of any sort of business. And obviously, we're talking about mobile apps here, and and it's the same thing for mobile apps as well.
That's right. To me, brand is like the answer on the question of a trust. Why do you trust this company? There are so many of those, and you're investing your money. What's special about this product from Apple or Samsung or Sony, whatever? Why do you invest your money, and can you trust this company that this product or service will be lasting, not for a few days, but you can easily use the same thing without any worries down the road, weeks, months, years ahead, depending on what product we're talking about, right?
Yeah, and exactly. And strong brands, it crosses generations, it lives for long periods of time. You've got those sort of big ones like Ford and stuff, which have been around for generations, and they sort of got their own sort of being, really. You've got people in the company who come and go, you've got lots of things that come and go, but the sort of brand idea sort of lives forever, so to speak.
A Mega Watch has been advertised for so many Bond's characters over the years. Yeah, even though we're not into the watches anymore, it's unless they're a smartwatch, but as a brand, it's been really popular, from Sean Connery to Daniel Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, super strong brand.
Oh yeah. Looking outside of the space of existing brands that basically go mobile to just get an extra channel to reach out their customers, what about kind of a newbie app that is yet to become popular? How does brand as a notion can work for it?
Yeah, so I think because it sits there right at the central point of like where you start and why you exist, it's really hard to not be intertwined with product. So sometimes they can be thought about separately, but I think they should really be thought about together. Brand really helps us as a company, particularly guide where we're going to take the product. It can kind of, you have lots of ideas and you go, does that sort of really try and achieve what we are trying to be? And it can certainly help guide the product. And also like just from fundamentally, that sort of mission really helps galvanize people internally to with that kind of shared purpose to motivate people. Businesses are made up a lot of people who are building stuff. And so that's sort of quite important, I think. A couple of other ideas that why it's so important for like particularly mobile app brands. I think the barrier to entry in a lot of spaces now is like, it's really low. We've seen it in the fast delivery space with sort of Gorillas and GoPuff and so many of these players with technology getting easier and easier. I just think particularly why we looked at brands so heavily is that we have to just find some kind of niche, some kind of point of difference to stand out versus like all these lots of brands that sort of doing the same thing in the space. So for small sort of businesses just starting out, yes, the product obviously there has to be some product market fit, but there was the idea I came across recently around sort of language market fit as well, making sure that you're communicating things clearly. So I think that is really important. I mean, once you've got all those kind of central things, I mean, from a mobile data standpoint, I think I've sort of talked about it before, but when you clearly articulate your value proposition or you build that trust, it has sort of real world impacts on the data. Things like it reduces your cost per acquisition because you convert more people who come to your product already know and trust you. So therefore, they're more likely to sign up to a free trial or use your product more often because you've got that kind of element of trust. I've seen it at previous businesses. I've worked in the language learning space. You've obviously got the behemoth that is Duolingo, battling against them. People already know Duolingo. They have the sense of what it is before they come to your product. And you see that in higher conversion rates and lower or high organic installs or whatever. So it has those kind of really fundamental impacts on the numbers as well. And then the second part of the equation is that if people trust you, and you build a good relationship with them, then lifetime value goes up. They stick with you longer, they're more loyal, and that's sort of the balancing act. So lower your CAC, increase your LTV, and that's the sort of the two part of the equation that's pretty important for most businesses.
Yeah, so brand is essentially your great weapon to combat this mobile churn problem that is a nightmare for so many people. You're spending money to get all those downloads, get people on board, and then you see them just slightly, quietly drifting away from you after the first week, the first month. And if you're building your app as a brand, this becomes for them like opening their smartphone and seeing on the screen an app. It's kind of a natural thing, like grab a taxi, you click on Uber almost automatically.
Yeah,
it's like what about search? Okay, Google. What about e-commerce? Amazon. What about getting myself somewhere? Uber. It's kind of it becomes a utility in a way if your app becomes a brand for somebody and perceived as a brand.
Yeah, I think, I mean, look, it doesn't take away the challenge of building a good product, right? You can have a great brand idea and a poor product, and people will churn. I mean, that is fun. That is kind of reality. I think it's just, it lifts it, particularly in competitive spaces where you're really competing for eyeballs and customers. That sort of building that trust and that relationship with customers will give you a little bit of an edge. So I'm not saying just invest in brand, it's going to solve all your problems. But I think if you do it in the right way, and it helps guide the product in the right way, and you're doing things for the right reasons, and people understand that, then it will support a lot of the other things you're doing.
Gotcha. Speaking of users, there are a couple of billions of smartphones in this world, a couple millions apps, and all this ocean of apps being used by several generations. For the most part, like the bulk of those apps being used by millennials, and I think I can attribute myself to millennial, roughly speaking. Still, definitely not Gen Z. And Gen Z is the second generation. Let's kind of draw a picture of difference in perception of mobile brands between Gen Z and millennials.
Yeah, I think I don't know exactly. The lines are obviously a little bit kind of gray, but I think from my standpoint, I probably speak from more of a millennial standpoint as well, from personal experience. There was that sort of shift, wasn't there, that apps were sort of less sort of just functional tools and started to become part of our lives, and sort of brands and products that we follow on social media, or we go to events with, or we listen to what they say, and they sort of really become brands in their own right. I think as a kind of millennial, well, that's certainly my kind of experience, sort of growing up, and as the sort of mobile industry sort of grown around, I guess. And I think that the slight difference made there with Gen Z, I think they also have inherited a lot of that as well. But what I've started to see in some research is this sort of shift towards sort of like cause marketing, a little bit of activism, where they kind of expect brands to have a purpose and to have some kind of like social cause, or to like stand for something, more than just sort of like a product, particularly more than millennials. I think there was some research I found where basically 57% of Gen Z sort of expect a brand to support a cause, for example, whereas only 25% of millennials expect that. So it's like they're really sort of invested in brands, this sort of Gen Z generation. And as a consequence, they'll recommend to friends, and there'll be that sort of virality as a consequence. So there's a slight difference between the two generations there, I'd say. And I'm sure there are plenty of other differences as well, but that's definitely sort of one that we're seeing. And particularly what we're trying to latch upon is just making sure that we stand for something, and that it's clear what we stand for as well, so that we can kind of resonate with that audience.
I think it may present a bit of a challenge for an app marketer not actually an app marketer, but the whole team that creates an app which will be used by these two generations. The product can be the same, but the approach to marketing should be different to speak the language you're approaching these different generations, to make sure you understand what's important for them. And just like you're saying, the cause becomes really important for Gen Z, because global warming is a problem they will just gradually dropping on their laps. This is what they will have to be dealing with once we become senior. Millennials, they will replace us. It's just life. And the cause is one of the major factors for them to make a decision. Should I use this app or should I use the other one?
Yeah, that's an interesting point around sort of multi-generational marketing and sort of building products. I mean, something I hadn't really thought about, but definitely is a huge challenge to sort of fit the needs of different users. We see that just within our user cohorts that we have within our product, which don't necessarily sit across multi-generations, but just sort of building a mobile app for different people, different groups of people in itself is a challenge, and sort of communicating to them. So that is definitely a challenge for lots of businesses.
Now, can you think of any common mistakes you probably see people do when they try to apply app brand concept for an app?
Yeah, I noticed you had Ryan on before, who I've sort of spoken to a lot, and his sort of view on brand is sort of don't have any guidelines. And I think I sort of resonate with that a little bit. So I think from my standpoint, don't be too rigid. I think particularly in a mobile space, where you're iterating quickly, you don't necessarily know, and you're testing lots of things. My experience with sort of really rigid brand guidelines is that they hamstring a lot of that creative testing. So make sure there's some flexibility in there, and that you don't have thousands of rules where you can't do this, you can't do that, and layers of sign off. In the mobile app space, in growth in particular, it really, you have to sort of come at it with no ego. Lots of different things might work, whether that's different copy or different creative. And you have to be willing to kind of, I think, bend some of those rules. So it's sort of having brand guidelines that fit for different areas. So, within a mobile space, you obviously have limited characters and limited space versus, if you're doing some branding exercises on TV or, mainstream media. So you have to be a little bit flexible and apply brand differently across different mediums. So yeah, that's definitely a mistake I see. And one that I've faced myself at previous businesses where we've had too strict rules and we've not been able to iterate quickly enough on sort of ad creative and stuff like that.
All right. Perhaps you have some takeaways for app marketers, something, I don't know, a couple of things so you would like them, retain in their memory once they, stop listening to our conversation and move on their app projects.
Yeah. I mean, the big point, it's funny because like 5 years ago, if you'd asked me this question around brand, I would have gone like, brand is just fluff. I really wouldn't have paid much attention to it. And I think it's just working at lots of different businesses where I've started to realize how important it is in the overall mix. So it's not going to be the silver bullet for everything. So the key takeaways that I'm sort of trying to get across really is like, don't forget it. Basically, yes, it's not going to be your answer for everything, and product and data are super important, particularly in mobile apps. But that sort of storytelling power, is sort of innate in humans. So don't forget it. And I guess similar to the point I was saying before, make sure there's some flexibility in it. Don't, particularly in mobile apps, don't have sort of hard and fast rules. Like, be open to some kind of flexibility. And I know, when I spoke to a few different people, and Ryan in particular, he actually says don't have any rules and just sort of go with whatever's working. And yes, that is obviously to some degree important in the mobile app space and testing and stuff. But have some flexibility.
Okay, Charlie, got you. That was the last question about the topic on the table, brands and apps. But I still have a few quick questions, which I ask pretty much every guest on this show to help the audience know, the people who come to Business of Apps podcast a little bit better. Okay, question number 1. What smartphone do you have now? Have you been switching between these, two behemoths, iOS and Android, or just, staying one line?
I've got a Google Pixel right now, and I've never owned an iPhone, so I've always had an Android. Yeah, so I don't even know what it'd be like to own an iPhone.
Okay, so you're on the other side, and you've been using your Android consistently. As the smartphone.
Yeah, since smartphones have sort of arrived, it's been Android all the way. Yeah.
Well, what about before, the smartphone era? What was your first mobile phone? Those flip phones.
Yeah, I think it was the Nokia 3310, which I think it is for a lot of people. Yeah, that was that was the first phone, the brick.
The flip phone. Now back to present. Imagine you've left your smartphone at home. What would be the most missing feature for you?
Yeah, I'm in the right place. I'm a sort of podcast addict. So I listen to podcasts constantly when I'm walking around. I have a sort of narrator in my ear for life, basically. So I think I'd be missing that massively. Spotify I listen to it on, basically. So
let me shake your hand. We're on the same page. I've been listening since 2005. So yeah, I hear you totally.
I think I think the gateway for me was sort of the Serial podcast series, the original. That sort of got me hooked.
Yeah, I got through the podcast about science, but still, but after that I picked up many more. But yeah, I totally see the value. It gradually became part of your life. You feel like those people on those podcasts, even though you never met them in person. But you have a feeling you know them in person, like you've been sitting at the same table with them.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So what new app technologies are you most excited right now? What feature, hardware, software kind of missing for your Google Pixel, and you would like it to, be added on your phone?
Yeah, I mean, this is slight contrary to, I guess, the sector that I work in, but I'm sort of moving towards fewer distractions, and I've been following things around like light phones and I guess some of the trends of people moving away from smartphones. And that's just from a personal standpoint. It actually all came about from some research I saw where this is from like any notification, whether it's just like email, Slack, on your phone. And if you're concentrating on something, it takes you about 20 minutes to refocus on the task if you get notified. So I've turned off all notifications on every app. So I'm the worst person to be marketed to, and I'm trying to do the opposite for someone. So yeah, I'm sort of really interested in that idea. I haven't gone full into it yet, but the idea of sort of moving away from like too much noise and streamlining it. So if I could get my podcast app on a light phone, I'd be good. That's what I need.
Yeah, so the pendulum swings back from, too many notifications. At some point there were none, then there were few, there are so many, so we have to turn them off to get better our life and, spend your time on something you really like and has a value for you. All right, so there you find a question before I let you go. How can people get in touch with you and get more information about what you do?
Yeah, I mean, best place really is LinkedIn is where I'm most active. So you should be able to find me just sort of searching in LinkedIn. I don't massively have social media, so that'll be the place to get hold of me.
Gotcha. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for being on the podcast. So thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
And that was Charlie Cooke, Head of Growth at Sidekick at Sorted Food. To listen to more episodes, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Just search for Business of Apps, and you will find us easily. Remember, we release episodes on Mondays, so subscribe, and you'll be able to get new episodes on your smartphone, tablet, or computer as soon as we release them. And please don't forget to leave us a review or comment on iTunes. It is highly appreciated. And all episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Apps podcast. For more, head on over to businessofapps.com.